It is now time to get into the game, and we are going to get hot and heavy with Final Fantasy VII here. It is already time to talk about steps. So let me clarify some things. This is a comprehensive tutorial. We are going, we're going to talk about things that are useful for beginners and for advanced, right? Intermediate. This is going to cover everything. So some of this information you don't need to apply in your first runs. In fact, if you are personally worried about step count and it's turning you off to the game, to the idea of speedrunning, don't worry, you don't have to do it. But I do think that you should still pay attention to this part of the lesson so that you understand how movement works in this game and why step count is a thing. Because if you start running the game but you're not doing steps, the information that you will gain from this lesson is going to inform you about why things are happening, and you're going to start doing steps naturally because it's just how you play the game. So, let's talk about it. Check out this this thing called fraction, that we call your fractions. This address in memory. What this address does is it is keeping track every frame that you are moving. So right now it's not doing anything. But if you move for a frame, it counts up. Every frame that you move, it counts up by 32. So 0, 32, 64, 96, right? And every time that it would hit 256, right, 224 plus 32 is 256, it rolls over to 0. So this is just flying by when you're moving. Whether you're running or whether you're walking, this just counts up by 32 every single frame that you're moving, and it rolls over at 256. So, you might be asking, what is this doing? Well, because we're on a hostile screen, it's not doing anything. Because we're on a non-hostile screen, it's not doing anything. This screen you can't get battles on. And so when fractions roll over, it doesn't do anything. So, if we run into the next screen, however, on this screen, you can get into battles. And so you'll notice that on this screen, check this out. Look at all the surrounding numbers here. On this screen, when fractions roll over to 0, our StepID incremented to 2, and our danger incremented to 16. And so every time on this screen that fractions roll over to 0, StepID increments and danger increments. And so what this is achieving for the game is the way that this game gives you random battles is not random at all. How it works is there is a encounter table that we call it, which is just a hard-coded, always the same list of numbers that the game one by one checks your danger against every time that your StepID increments. And if your danger is higher than that number it checks against, you get into a battle. Let me explain this a couple different ways, because this is a very, very important concept, and it sounds really complicated, but it's actually extremely simple once you get it. If you turn on your console, hit new game, and you always move the same way every time, you will always get into the same battles in the same places. Let me give you a quick example. We're going to move up here. We're going to move like this. This is just the optimal way to get through this part, right? We're going to name Cloud. We're going to name Barrett. And then we're going to go through this little sequence, all right? And so because of our movement and because of how the system works, the first battle that we're going to get into after we round this corner is going to be right here. I said it too late. It looked like I just reacted, but instead, no, we knew that battle was going to be right there. and it'll always be right there. And then we can run up here. And if you want, you can be looking at our fractions moving, but notice on this screen, our StepID stops incrementing as our fractions roll over. That's because this screen is not live. Can you see mouse cursor? Our next battle is going to be about right here, and it's going to be with 2 laser robots. So as you can see, because of how it's coded, it's always the same. As long as you behave the same. And this is what I mean when I say that even if you don't apply step routing to your runs, you're going to start to notice the patterns. And if you understand this part of the lesson, then you're going to understand why that is. So, here's exactly what's happening. Is every time that the fractions roll over, if the screen that you are on is hostile, then the game will increment this value called your StepID, and it will give you danger. And the purpose of these 2 numbers is that your danger makes it so that you don't just get into a battle in one step. It makes it so that as you get higher danger, the longer you've gone without getting into a battle, the more likely you are to get into a battle. So that's how the game balances not getting into fights immediately after you've already had a fight, and not going too long without a fight either. You have this danger that goes up. So that's what danger is. It increments every time fractions roll over. And then the purpose of StepID is that, remember that I described the encounter table as a hard-coded list of numbers that the game checks one by one? Your StepID is essentially your bookmark or your spot on that list, right? This is the game keeping track of where you are on the list, so it knows where to check next time the fractions roll over. So exactly the process is, I moved a frame, active window. I moved a frame, increase the fractions. I move a frame, increase the fractions, right? But now on this frame, when I move the entire process is increment fractions, they rolled over to 0. So now, increment danger, increment StepID, use the StepID to look that far down on the encounter table to find our number that we're going to check danger against. And if danger is higher than that number, battle. And when you get into a battle, your fractions your danger resets back to 0. Now that part I hope is pretty clear. I'm going to give you a visual though. This is a program called Big Shoes that was coded by Ace Zephyr in Python, and you may use it. You can find it on the FF7 Discord, the speedrunning Discord, which you can find on speedrun.com/FF7, and it's under the Resources tab. You can find this thing called Big Shoes. It connects to emulators. This is not a tool that you would use in a run. This is for research purposes. But it connects, and so this is an excellent visual representation of what is happening as you run. You are the dot here, and as you run, your steps go up to the right, or your steps go up, and your danger increases at the rate of these blue the blue diagonal line. And then these blue bars coming down are the encounter checks. So right now, because we just got into a fight, our danger is 0, and we're on step 156, So as we run, our steps are going to go up, and every time our steps roll over, the game is going to check for a encounter. However, these blue bars are representing the number of that encounter check. Like this one right here, for example, is like 1750 or something. So if your danger is anywhere above that 1800, you're gonna hit this line as you go to the right and get into an encounter. But because our danger at this point is only gonna be like 400, 500, we go underneath it, right? But then this encounter check right here, and then there's a bunch of really high ones. And then this one right here, though, checks like 500. But at that point, our danger is going to be about 1,000. And we are going to hit that encounter and we're going to get into it. So as we run, you can see up here, you can see our step ID incrementing and our danger incrementing. And then on Big Shoes, you can see we're going to the right as our step ID increases. We're going up as our danger increases along that blue predictive line. And so why does Big Shoes know the future of encounter checks? Because it's hard-coded into the game. It's always the same. And so what this is going to result in, I'll try to time it out here. So just like I said a minute ago, our danger is just over. Oh, our danger is actually higher than 1,000 because we switched to a room that has higher danger incrementation. That's a thing we'll get into in a minute. But just as suspected, right here we get into a fight, and then our danger, once the fight is over, our danger decreases back to 0. So right there, our danger reset to 0. Fractions are always 0 after a random battle because that's when the rollover, that's when the battle check occurs. And then on the graph, you can see we dropped back down to 0 to start over now. Okay, so that is how encounters work. So now we're going to talk about a quirk to getting into battles. So let's once again come over here, do an optimal whip around this corner. Now that you are armed with the knowledge of the fact that the battles always occur, with the same logic, let's say you know the frame that you're about to get into a battle. And we know that it's step ID 70. Is it 76 or 74? It's 76, okay. So we know, based on everything I've said, that we are going to get into a battle on the next frame that I move. The next frame that I move. So, and so to show that, there it is. However, if you menu on the frame that you would get a battle, hang on, just like that, notice our fractions roll over to 0, our step ID is 76, but when I exit, no battle, and you just keep going. You can skip battles in this game. No menu? Menu. How about that? However, before your mind explodes about the implications of this in a speedrun, notice our danger value right now. When you skip a battle, your danger does not reset. So there's the battle that we would normally get into. And when we get into the battle, Big Shoes, our danger hasn't actually reset to 0 yet, so that's why Big Shoes displays the way that it does right now. But then once we escape, our danger resets to 0, and now we're not going to get into a battle until this one over here. If we do the skip, and then exit, now you'll see our danger did not reset, so it looks like we're actually going to get into a battle right here instead, which would be bad, because that's an earlier battle, and so this kind of makes it look like it doesn't actually do anything helpful for you, but in this particular case, we run up here, and then I think our danger incrementation is actually going to change. Like one of the upcoming rooms, right? One of the upcoming rooms has lower danger incrementation, and so that's actually going to get us underneath this encounter, because we're actually not going to build up as much danger as is currently being predicted by Big Shoes. But yeah, as we get into this room, so here's another interesting concept, is that this room actually accrues danger more slowly than the other rooms do. And so we end up not getting into this battle until this line right here. And so what that means is that whether or not we get into this battle right here, our next battle is going to be this one. Which means that this battle is skippable. Because there are a lot of other times where if you were to skip a battle, it just makes you get into another battle right away, and so there's no point in skipping the battle. And there are actually very, very few battles that you can skip without just adding another battle to counteract it, you know? This is actually one of the pretty rare situations in which it actually works. So it's funny that it's the first random battle. Oh, let me just tell you, the way that you actually specifically execute a battle skip is you need to press the movement on the D-pad on one frame, and then press triangle for the menu on the next frame. And fields are 30 frames per second. So if you press them both at the exact same time, you'll just get a menu. And you won't get movement. If you press triangle 2 frames late, you get into the battle, because it finished the check. But if you press triangle 1 frame after the D-pad, you get the skip. You get the movement with it. So just so you know, very specifically, the D-pad movement has to occur, and then the menu 1 frame later. Yeah. So there you go. That's how battle skips work. They're one thing to know about them, though, is that they're very rarely actually useful. And the only way to execute one is to know exactly where you are on steps. And so they are something that is only for if you're on a step route and you know it's skippable, you know? Otherwise, don't bother. So, that's battle skips, but once again, rarely useful. However, I think it's very interesting also just to know, in order to understand how battles work in the game. Let's talk about formations real quick. So, you'll notice right here in the PlayStation memory, at address 071C20, you have something called a formation ID. Your step ID, your danger, all that decides when you get into a random battle, but it doesn't decide what the enemies in the random battle are. That is decided by your formation ID. So at formation ID 0, for example, the battle that we get here is 2 soldiers. There it is. And now, when we got into the battle, one more thing that occurred, and this was triggered by the fact that we got into a battle, is our formation ID went up by 2. Let's say we were here, and our formation ID was already 2. Then we get into a battle. Our formation ID went up to 4 by the battle. And look at this, it's different enemies. Let's say our formation ID was 4. It goes up to 6. And the battle that occurs is 2 of these things. So what happens in this game is every time that you get into a battle, your formation ID increments. And that formation ID is used to decide what the enemies are in the game. Would the formation ID make you fight enemies that aren't supposed to be there? No, because it's a combination of your formation ID and what field you're on. Your field ID is also important. Like every field only has so many formations, and so then your formation ID decides which of those formations you get. I mean, that's basically it about formations, and so it's a very simple concept. Oh, one more thing to talk about formations, okay? Remember the battle skips? This is information that's for if you're creating a step route for yourself, but this is just something that's interesting. Notice that we're at formation ID 0 here, and we're at fraction 224, step ID 74. This is the spot I was showing you earlier for the battle skip, where you can skip a battle if you menu right. Check this out. If you skip the battle, your formations actually increase as if you got into the fight. Isn't that wacky? So, remember, if you're ever thinking about doing battle skips, or you're thinking about routing a battle skip in to your step route, or that kind of thing, remember, you cannot have something be like, you can either walk under it, or you can battle skip it, and it doesn't matter. No, it's different. Your formation ID actually increases when you skip a battle using the menu. But it doesn't if you walk under, because the logic never fired to get you into a battle. Do boss battle triggers affect your formation ID? Scripted encounters do not trigger or do not increase your formation ID. I believe the reason is that the logic that fires, that changes your formation ID is specifically the logic that fires when your danger is over the encounter threshold at the step ID that you're at when the fractions roll over, right? When that whole process fires, that's when formation ID changes. That's also why when you skip an encounter like this, your formation ID goes up, because all of that logic just triggered. It just didn't do the battle because it loaded the menu module instead. All right, there we go. Oh yeah, skipping encounters also causes something called the double boss glitch, double boss bug. Yeah, that's a really good point. If you skip an encounter using the battle skip, and then your next encounter is a boss fight, you will fight the boss twice. That actually sounds like it would be fun to show real quick. Okay, check this out. Let's talk about battle skips for one more second. Oh man, there we go. Okay, so we just skipped an encounter. You see? We're on the encounter, and we just skipped it. Okay? If you do that, and then you go and immediately go fight a boss, I'm not going to walk through the boss yet. We're just going to show this real quick. Okay, hopefully this kills. Nice. Alright, so we just killed Guard Scorpion, right? We skipped an encounter, and then we killed Guard Scorpion. Check this out. Battle Swirl. Oh, what's up, Guard Scorpion? What the fuck? Okay. Do you hear the music, too? We refer to this as the Trumpets of Doom, yes. Hang on, I really want to survive this fight so you can see what's after it. Just to show what happens if you end up beating the fight. Okay. So you've killed him a second time with the Trumpets of Doom happening. And wow, you get experience again. There's even Trumpets of Doom now. And then the game just continues as normal, if that happens. So there we go. Except we got the rewards twice. We have 2 assault guns, you know? We fought the boss twice. So anyway, that's a bug that happens. So that happens if you get into a scripted fight, as in a fight that's triggered not by the random encounter logic, after you have skipped a battle that would be triggered by the random encounter logic. So what you have to do is, like, let's say your route has a battle skip in it, and you perform a battle skip. You must get into a regular random encounter before the next scripted encounter. Otherwise, the next scripted encounter will double trigger like that, and you'll get into it twice. So there you go.